The rain hammered against the tin roof of Marcus Chen's farmhouse with a violence that made even the old timber walls shudder. Lightning split the Nebraska sky like broken glass, illuminating the endless cornfields that stretched beyond his property line. Marcus sat in his favorite worn leather chair, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, watching the storm rage through his front window. At 62, Marcus had seen plenty of prairie storms, but this one felt different. The meteorologists on the radio had been babbling about unusual electromagnetic activity and solar flares, but Marcus paid little attention to such things. He was a simple man who believed in what he could see, touch, and grow with his own hands. The knock on his door came just after midnight, barely audible above the thunder. Marcus frowned, setting down his cup. Who would be out in weather like this? The nearest neighbor was 15 miles away, and the highway patrol rarely ventured down his gravel road unless there was serious trouble. Another knock, weaker this time, almost desperate. Marcus grabbed his shotgun from beside the door, not out of fear but from a lifetime of prairie caution. He flicked on the porch light and peered through the window beside the door. What he saw made him question his sanity. A figure hunched against his door, clearly humanoid but wrong in ways that made his brain struggle to process the image. The being was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with limbs that seemed too long and joints that bent at slightly incorrect angles. Its skin appeared to shimmer with an oily, iridescent quality that shifted colors in the porch light. What looked like clothing hung in tatters around its frame, revealing patches of that strange, shifting skin underneath. The creature's head turned toward the window, and Marcus found himself staring into eyes that held an intelligence so profound it made him dizzy. They were large, taking up nearly a third of its elongated face, and they glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with its breathing. Marcus had never believed in aliens, UFOs, or any of that nonsense. But standing on his porch was something that definitely wasn't human, and it was clearly in distress. The being raised what appeared to be a hand, 4 fingers instead of 5, each ending in a claw-like appendage, and pressed it against the glass. The gesture was so unmistakably pleading that Marcus felt his heart squeeze with unexpected sympathy. "Jesus," he muttered, setting aside his shotgun. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, words she'd spoken countless times during his childhood. "Boy, you never know when you might be entertaining angels unaware. Always help those who need shelter." Marcus unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The alien collapsed forward, catching itself on the doorframe with movements that suggested it was operating on the last reserves of its strength. Up close, Marcus could see that its strange skin was marked with what looked like burns and cuts, some oozing a silvery fluid that might have been blood. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, the same tone he used with injured animals. "I don't know what you are, but you look like you need help." The alien's head lifted, and when their eyes met, Marcus felt something extraordinary happen. Without words, without any form of communication he could understand, he somehow knew that this being meant him no harm. More than that, he sensed a weariness so profound it made his own tired bones ache in sympathy. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked, knowing the creature probably couldn't understand English, but hoping his tone would convey his intent. To his surprise, the alien nodded, a very human gesture that somehow looked right when it performed it. With Marcus's help, it managed to shuffle inside, leaving wet marks on the hardwood floor that gleamed like liquid mercury in the lamplight. Marcus guided his unexpected guest to the couch, noting how the alien moved with obvious pain but maintained a dignity that reminded him of wounded soldiers he'd known. It settled onto the cushions with a soft sound that might have been relief, its large eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "You hungry?" Marcus asked, miming eating. "Thirsty?" He pretended to drink from a cup. The alien tilted its head, studying him with an intensity that should have been unsettling, but somehow felt respectful. It made a series of soft sounds, musical and complex, that were clearly attempts at communication. When Marcus shook his head to indicate he didn't understand, the alien simply nodded again and gestured toward itself, then toward Marcus, as if trying to express gratitude. Marcus spent the next hour bustling around his small house gathering supplies. He brought water in a clean bowl, not knowing if the alien could drink from a glass. He offered food, simple crackers and bread, watching as his guest examined each item with scientific curiosity before taking small, cautious bites. The alien's wounds concerned him most. Marcus had served as a medic in Vietnam before returning to take over the family farm. and he recognized serious injuries when he saw them. Whatever had happened to this being, it had been through hell. He brought his first aid kit and began cleaning the worst of the wounds with careful, gentle movements. The alien submitted to his ministrations with a patience that spoke of either great trust or complete exhaustion. The silvery blood cleaned away easily with water, and to Marcus's surprise, the wounds beneath appeared to be healing already, edges knitting together with visible progress. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to weaken. Marcus found himself sitting in the chair across from his guest, watching it sleep with an expression of profound peace on its alien features. The being's chest rose and fell in a rhythm that reminded him that, whatever else it might be, it was a living creature in need of sanctuary. Marcus Chen had spent his entire life believing that kindness was its own reward, that helping others was simply what decent people did. He had no idea that his simple act of compassion had just saved the life of the most powerful being in the known galaxy, or that his small farmhouse had become the center of events that would reshape humanity's future among the stars. Marcus woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted upright in his chair, neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle, and rushed toward the kitchen where smoke was beginning to curl from the stove. His alien guest stood before the burner, poking at what remained of a frying pan with one long finger, its expression puzzled and slightly embarrassed. "Whoa there," Marcus said, quickly turning off the gas and moving the ruined pan to a cool burner. The metal had somehow been melted into abstract shapes as if exposed to tremendous heat. He looked at the alien's hands, noting a faint glow emanating from its fingertips that was already fading. The being made those musical sounds again, clearly apologetic, and gestured helplessly at the destruction. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle. "Guess your people have a different way of cooking, huh?" Over the next few days, Marcus learned to communicate with his guest through gestures, drawings, and a surprising amount of patience. The alien, whom Marcus had started calling Kale after the sturdy green that grew in his garden, proved to be remarkably intelligent and adaptable. It learned to modulate whatever internal heat source had destroyed the frying pan, and began helping around the farm with an eagerness that touched Marcus deeply. Kale's strength was extraordinary. Marcus watched in amazement as it lifted fallen tree branches that would have required a tractor to move, yet handled delicate tomato seedlings with the gentleness of a master gardener. Its alien physiology seemed designed for both power and precision, and it appeared genuinely fascinated by the simple rhythms of farm life. The healing continued at an astounding rate. Within 3 days, the worst of Kale's wounds had disappeared entirely, leaving only faint silver lines on its iridescent skin. Its movements became more fluid, more confident, though Marcus noticed it still startled at sudden sounds and often gazed at the sky with what seemed like apprehension. On the 4th day, while they worked together repairing a section of fence damaged by the storm, Kale suddenly stopped and placed its hand on Marcus's shoulder. The alien's large eyes were fixed on something in the distance, and its grip tightened with obvious urgency. Marcus followed its gaze and saw a dust cloud approaching from the direction of the main road. As it drew closer, he could make out a convoy of black vehicles moving far too fast for the gravel road. Government plates glinted in the afternoon sun. "Company," Marcus muttered, recognizing trouble when he saw it. He'd had enough dealings with federal agencies over agricultural regulations to know that men in black suits rarely brought good news to farmers. Kale made a series of rapid, agitated sounds and began backing toward the house. The fear in its posture was unmistakable, and Marcus felt a protective instinct surge within him that surprised him with its intensity. This being had trusted him, had worked beside him, had shown him kindness and gratitude. Whatever these government types wanted, Marcus wasn't about to let them harm his guest. The convoy consisted of 4 black SUVs and what appeared to be a specialized van equipped with various antennas and monitoring equipment. They pulled into Marcus's driveway with military precision, and armed agents began deploying before the vehicles had fully stopped. A woman in an expensive suit stepped out of the lead vehicle, her movements crisp and authoritative. She was followed by a man in military fatigues who carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Mr. Chen," the woman called out as she approached, her voice carrying the kind of polite menace that government officials used when they wanted to appear reasonable while making threats. "I'm Agent Sarah Morrison, Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. We need to speak with you about your recent house guest. Marcus crossed his arms, positioning himself between the agents and the house where Cale had disappeared. Don't know what you're talking about. Been farming this land for 40 years, and I've never had any extraterrestrial affairs worth mentioning. Agent Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Chen, we have satellite imagery showing an unidentified craft crash landing in the storm 3 nights ago, approximately 2 miles from this location. We've been tracking a heat signature moving from that crash site to your property. Must be one of my cows, Marcus replied deadpan. They generate a lot of heat. The military officer stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Sir, we have reason to believe you're harboring an alien entity that poses a significant threat to national security. We're authorized to search these premises and detain any non-human life forms we discover. Marcus felt his temper beginning to rise. This is private property and I haven't seen any warrants. That thing you're calling a threat has spent the last 4 days helping me repair storm damage and learning to feed my chickens. Doesn't seem particularly dangerous to me. Agent Morrison's expression sharpened. Mr. Chen, you don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't some lost space tourist. Our intelligence suggests this entity is connected to a vast alien civilization that could represent an existential threat to humanity. Funny, Marcus said, thinking of Cale's gentle hands carefully transplanting seedlings. All I see is someone who needed help. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but at that moment Cale emerged from the house. It moved with slow, deliberate steps, its hands clearly visible and empty. The agents immediately raised their weapons, but Cale showed no fear. Instead, it walked calmly to Marcus's side and placed a protective hand on the older man's shoulder. Don't, Marcus said quietly to the agents, noting how their fingers had moved to triggers. It's not threatening anyone. Cale began to speak, not in the musical sounds Marcus had grown accustomed to, but in perfect accented English. I am Kethavar, and I mean no harm to your people. This human showed me kindness when I was injured and alone. I will not allow him to be harmed for his compassion. Agent Morrison's eyes widened. You can speak English? I can speak many languages, Cale replied, its voice carrying an authority that made even the armed agent step back slightly. I have been learning yours by observing your communications networks. I chose not to speak earlier because I was evaluating the character of those I encountered. Marcus looked up at his alien friend, suddenly understanding that there was far more to Cale than he had realized. The being's posture had changed, becoming more regal, more commanding. Its eyes held depths that spoke of vast knowledge and responsibility. Mr. Chen, Cale continued, its gaze never leaving the agents, has shown me something remarkable about your species. In a galaxy where most civilizations would have demanded rewards or recognition for such aid, he asked for nothing. He helped simply because help was needed. Agent Morrison lowered her weapon slightly. What are you exactly? What do you want with Earth? Cale's response would change everything Marcus thought he knew about his quiet guest and humanity's place in the universe. Cale stood perfectly still for a long moment, its luminous eyes studying each of the armed agents with an intensity that made them visibly uncomfortable. When it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone present like the atmosphere before a storm. I am Kethavar Zethlon, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Confederation, it said simply. What you call the Milky Way galaxy is under my protection and governance. Agent Morrison's weapon clattered to the ground. The military officer's face went pale beneath his tan. Marcus just blinked, processing this information with the same calm acceptance he'd shown when first encountering an injured alien on his porch. Supreme Commander, Agent Morrison managed to stammer. Of the entire galaxy? Of those civilizations advanced enough to participate in interstellar governance, Cale clarified. There are currently 4,736 member species in the Confederation. Until recently, humanity was not among them. Marcus scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, that explains why you were so interested in my farming techniques. Probably don't see much small-scale agriculture when you're running a galaxy. Despite the gravity of the situation, Cale's features shifted into what Marcus had learned to recognize as its version of a smile. Indeed, Marcus Chen. Your methods are remarkably efficient for their simplicity. I have learned much from observing your work. Agent Morrison found her voice again. If you're really this Supreme Commander, what were you doing crashed on Earth? Why were you injured? Kale's expression grew somber. There are forces in the galaxy that oppose the Confederation's peaceful expansion. A radical faction called the Hegemony believes that primitive species should be conquered or eliminated, rather than nurtured toward advancement. 3 of their battlecruisers ambushed my diplomatic vessel as I was returning from negotiations with a potential new member species. The alien gestured toward the sky. My ship was severely damaged. I was forced to make an emergency landing on the nearest habitable world, which happened to be Earth. My navigation systems chose this location because it showed the lowest probability of immediate contact with your species. Fat lot of good that did, Marcus observed. Landed practically in my backyard. Indeed, Kale agreed. But perhaps that was fortunate. My encounter with you has taught me something crucial about humanity that our previous observations had missed. Agent Morrison was frantically taking notes on a tablet. What kind of observations? How long have you been watching us? The Confederation has been monitoring Earth for approximately 200 of your years, Kale replied. We have strict protocols about interfering with developing civilizations. We observe, we learn, and when a species demonstrates sufficient advancement and peaceful intent, we extend an invitation to join the Galactic community. The military officer finally found his voice. Are we being considered for membership? Kale was quiet for several heartbeats. That is complicated. Humanity presents a unique challenge for the Confederation Council. Your species shows remarkable ingenuity, creativity, and adaptability. Your scientific advancement has been extraordinarily rapid. However, your history is marked by conflicts that concern many of our member species. Marcus nodded slowly. We're not exactly known for getting along with each other. Precisely, Kale confirmed. Many species in the Confederation went through violent phases during their development, but few maintained such persistent warfare even after achieving global communication and nuclear capabilities. The Council has been divided on whether humanity is ready for galactic citizenship. Agent Morrison looked up from her tablet. And your opinion? Until 3 days ago, I shared the Council's concerns, Kale admitted. The report suggested that humans were primarily motivated by self-interest, resource acquisition, and tribal loyalty. The data indicated that first contact would likely result in attempts to exploit or weaponize Confederation technology. The alien turned to look at Marcus, its expression filled with something that might have been wonder. Then I met a human who saw a wounded stranger and thought only of providing shelter, who asked for nothing in return, expected no reward, and showed no fear when he could have simply closed his door and pretended he had seen nothing. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the attention. Wasn't anything special. Just what any decent person would do. That, Kale said emphatically, is exactly what makes it special. In 4 centuries of galactic governance, I have encountered thousands of species at various stages of development. Most show compassion primarily to their own kind, and then only when it serves their interests. True altruism toward complete strangers, especially strangers who are clearly alien, is extraordinarily rare. Agent Morrison was scribbling frantically. So this changes your assessment of humanity? Kale considered the question carefully. One human's actions cannot speak for an entire species. But Marcus Chen's behavior suggests that humanity possesses something the Confederation desperately needs right now. Which is? The military officer asked. The ability to see past differences and offer help based purely on need, Kale replied. The hegemony has been growing stronger, converting species through force and intimidation. They believe that compassion is weakness that only the strong deserve to survive. They view the Confederation's inclusive policies as evidence of our decline. The alien's eyes began to glow brighter, and Marcus could sense the weight of galactic responsibility settling back onto his guest's shoulders. If humanity can be taught to extend the same compassion Marcus showed me to other species throughout the galaxy, you could become not just members of the Confederation, but leaders in the fight against those who would see the universe ruled by fear and strength alone. A new sound filled the air, a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Everyone looked up to see objects appearing in the sky, sleek vessels that moved with impossible grace and speed. My rescue fleet, Kale explained, noting their alarm. I activated my emergency beacon this morning. They have been searching for me since the attack. Agent Morrison stepped forward, her earlier shock replaced by professional curiosity. What happens now? Will you be leaving Earth? Kale looked at Marcus, and the farmer saw depths of gratitude in those alien eyes that made his chest tight with emotion. I will return to the Confederation Council and make my report. I will recommend that humanity be fast-tracked for membership consideration, based on evidence that your species possesses the moral character necessary for galactic citizenship. And if they agree, Marcus asked, then everything changes, Kale said simply, for humanity and for the galaxy itself. 3 days after Kale's departure, Marcus found himself aboard a Confederation vessel that defied every law of physics he understood. The ship was massive, yet moved through space with the silence of a soap bubble drifting on a breeze. Through the transparent walls of his quarters, he could see Earth shrinking behind them, a blue marble that contained everything he had ever known. Agent Morrison sat across from him, equally overwhelmed but trying to maintain her professional composure. I still can't believe they invited us to observe the council proceedings, she said, staring out at the starfield rushing past at speeds that should have been impossible. Kale said it was unprecedented. Marcus replied, using the name he'd grown comfortable with rather than the formal title that still felt strange on his tongue. Never had primitive species representatives present during membership discussions. The journey to the Confederation capital took 6 hours, crossing distances that would have required generations for human spacecraft to traverse. When they finally arrived at Zentara Prime, Marcus pressed his face to the viewing port like a child seeing his first circus. The space around the planet was alive with traffic. Ships of dozens of different designs moved in carefully orchestrated patterns, some so alien that Marcus's brain struggled to process their geometry. The planet itself was a work of art, with cities that sparkled like jewels connected by flowing lines of light that followed the natural contours of continents. 4,000 different species, he murmured, watching a vessel that appeared to be made entirely of living crystal dock, with a station that resembled a vast flower in bloom. Hard to wrap your head around. Their escort, a tall crystalline being called Cathara, had explained that the Confederation Council chambers could accommodate representatives from all member species simultaneously. As they descended through Zentara's atmosphere, Marcus began to understand the engineering marvels that made such diversity possible. The council building rose from the planet's surface like a mountain that had been grown rather than built. Its walls shifted and flowed to provide appropriate atmospheric conditions for different species, while gravity fields allowed beings of vastly different physiologies to share the same spaces. Inside, Marcus and Agent Morrison were led to an observation gallery that overlooked the main chamber. Below them, hundreds of beings that challenged every assumption about life in the universe had gathered to debate humanity's fate. Kale stood at the center of the vast chamber, somehow commanding attention despite being surrounded by entities that ranged from the beautiful to the bizarre. There were beings of pure energy contained in geometric shells, aquatic species in mobile water environments, and creatures so alien that Marcus could only assume they were intelligent by their presence in the chamber. Honored counselors, Kale began, its voice somehow audible to every being present despite the various atmospheric requirements. I stand before you today to recommend the immediate acceptance of humanity into the Confederation, with full membership status and protection protocols. A ripple of movement went through the chamber. One of the energy beings pulsed brighter. Supreme Commander, this is highly irregular. The species in question has not completed even the preliminary peaceful contact protocols. They maintain thousands of separate political entities, many of which are actively hostile to one another. Another voice, this one coming from a being that resembled a walking tree, added, the surveillance reports indicate persistent warfare, environmental destruction, and social inequality. By what standard do they qualify for membership? Kale gestured toward the observation gallery where Marcus and Agent Morrison sat. By the standard that matters most. When faced with a stranger in need, they choose compassion over fear. When confronted with the unknown, they choose curiosity over hostility. When given the opportunity to exploit or bargain, they choose to help without expectation of reward. A serpentine creature with multiple heads spoke in harmonious chorus. You speak of one human, Supreme Commander. One individual cannot represent an entire species. By this logic, we should have granted membership to the Corvani, based on their most peaceful individuals, ignoring the fact that their military castes were simultaneously planning galactic conquest. Marcus felt his heart sink. The alien made a valid point. He was just one person, and Earth was full of people who might not have made the same choices he had. But Kale had anticipated this objection. The difference, Counselor Veshai, is that Marcus Chen's behavior was not an anomaly. Our long-term observations show that such acts of altruism are common among humans, even toward their own species. They regularly risk their lives for strangers, donate resources to help those they will never meet, and create institutions dedicated to protecting the weak and vulnerable. A new voice joined the debate, coming from a section of the chamber where the atmospheric conditions created a swirling mist. But they also wage war, pollute their environment, and maintain systems of inequality. How do we reconcile these contradictions? Because, Kale replied, they are a young species still learning to balance their individual desires with collective needs. Their capacity for growth is remarkable. In just 2 centuries, they have gone from believing their planet was the center of the universe to sending exploratory probes to other star systems. They have begun to address their environmental challenges and are actively working to reduce conflicts. An ancient-looking being that seemed to be made of living stone spoke with a voice like grinding mountains. The hegemony grows stronger each day, Supreme Commander. They have already converted 12 species through force. Can we afford to grant membership to a species that might be easily corrupted by promises of power? This was the question Marcus had been dreading. He stood up in the observation gallery, surprising Agent Morrison and drawing the attention of the entire chamber. "May I speak?" he called out, his voice somehow carrying despite the vast distances involved. A hush fell over the chamber. Kale looked up at him with an expression of surprise and encouragement. "Honored beings," Marcus began, feeling foolish but determined to continue. "I'm just a farmer from Nebraska. I don't understand galactic politics or know much about the universe beyond my own little patch of dirt. But I know something about human nature that your observations might have missed." He took a deep breath, aware that the fate of his entire species might rest on his next words. "We humans were stubborn. When someone tries to force us to do something, we tend to dig in our heels and fight back. The hegemony might think they can convert us, but they don't understand what they're dealing with." Marcus gestured toward Agent Morrison. "This woman here, she's a government agent. 3 days ago, she was ready to arrest Kale and hand him over to people who would have dissected him for science. But when she learned who he really was and what he represented, she changed her position. She's here now as an advocate for peaceful contact." The chamber remained silent, hundreds of alien minds focused on his words. "That's what humans do," Marcus continued. "We learn, we adapt. We change our minds when presented with better information. And once we decide something is right, we'll fight to the death to protect it. If you give us a chance to see what the Confederation represents, we won't just resist the hegemony. We'll become their worst nightmare." Agent Morrison stood beside him. "The farmer's right. Humanity doesn't respond well to bullies. If this hegemony wants a fight, they'll get one. But if you show us a better way, a path to peace and cooperation among the stars, we'll follow it, and we'll help you defend it." The ancient stone being spoke again. Bold words from a primitive species. But words are easily spoken. How do we know humanity will honor its commitments? Kale stepped forward, its voice carrying absolute conviction. "Because I have seen what they are capable of when they choose to do right." Marcus Chen had no idea who I was, no knowledge of what helping me might gain him. He saw only someone who needed shelter, and he provided it. That kind of moral courage cannot be faked or taught. It simply is. The Supreme Commander's eyes blazed with renewed intensity. "Counselors, the galaxy stands at a crossroads. The hegemony offers strength through dominance, unity through fear. But Marcus Chen showed me another path. He demonstrated that true strength comes from choosing to help, even when there is no benefit to oneself. If humanity can learn to extend that same compassion to the stars, they will not just survive the coming conflicts, they will lead us to victory." The debate that followed would determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of free will itself in the galaxy. The debate had been raging for 6 hours when the alarms began to sound. A piercing wail filled the council chamber as emergency lights bathed the vast space in pulsing red. Kale's head snapped up, its luminous eyes scanning the chamber with sudden urgency. "All counselors remain calm," Kale commanded, its authority cutting through the rising panic. "Security protocols are now in effect." A holographic display materialized above the chamber floor, showing the space around Zentara Prime. Marcus watched in horror as massive ships, dark and angular where Confederation vessels were graceful and flowing, emerged from what appeared to be tiers in space itself. "Hegemony attack fleet," announced Cathara. the crystalline being who had escorted them. 47 battlecruisers, 12 siege platforms, and what appears to be a new class of vessel we haven't encountered before. Agent Morrison gripped Marcus's arm. How did they find this place? I thought the Confederation capital was supposed to be secret. Cale's expression was grim. They were waiting for me to return. This is not a random attack. It's a targeted assault designed to eliminate the Council during our session. Someone provided them with our location and timing. The ancient stone being, who Marcus had learned was called Theron the Enduring, spoke with surprising urgency for someone made of living rock. Supreme Commander, if they succeed in destroying the Council, the Confederation will fragment. Without central leadership, member species will fall to the hegemony one by one. Evacuation protocols are initiating, announced another voice over the communication system. All non-essential personnel proceed to designated safety zones. But Cale shook its head firmly. No evacuation. If we run now, the hegemony wins everything. They will broadcast our retreat across the galaxy, proving that even our strongest stronghold cannot stand against them. Marcus looked down at the alien leader he had come to respect, and felt his heart sink. Through the chamber's transparent sections, he could see Confederation defense ships moving to intercept the attackers, but they were vastly outnumbered. The elegant vessels that had seemed so impressive were dwarfed by the hegemony's brutal war machines. There has to be something we can do, Agent Morrison said, though her voice betrayed her understanding of how helpless they were. That was when Marcus noticed something that made his farmer's instincts prickle with recognition. The hegemony ships were moving in a specific pattern, not random or tactical, but methodical, like a farmer systematically harvesting a field. They're not trying to destroy everything, he said suddenly, drawing startled looks from both Agent Morrison and Kethera. Look at their formation. They're being selective, surgical. They want to capture the Council, not eliminate it. Cale's head turned toward the observation gallery, its eyes brightening with understanding. Marcus is correct. The hegemony doesn't want us dead. They want us converted. A Confederation Council forced to serve the hegemony would be worth more than 1,000 military victories. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If the hegemony could parade the Council as willing converts, it would shatter the morale of every Confederation world. Species that had maintained their independence for millennia would surrender, rather than face what appeared to be inevitable defeat. How do we stop them? The Serpentine Counselor Veshai asked, all of its heads focused on the tactical display. We don't stop them, Marcus said quietly, an idea forming in his mind. We let them capture exactly what they came for. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of distant explosions as the battle raged outside. Explain, Cale commanded. Marcus stood up, his plain farmer's clothing and weathered hands looking absurdly out of place among the galactic dignitaries. You said the hegemony converts species through force and intimidation. They make people believe resistance is hopeless. But what if they captured the Council and found out they'd grabbed the wrong thing? Agent Morrison's eyes widened as she caught on. A Trojan horse. Exactly, Marcus continued, warming to the idea. The hegemony expects you to try to escape or fight to the death. They're not prepared for you to surrender willingly and then turn the tables on them from the inside. Theron the Enduring's massive form shifted. The risks would be enormous. If we fail, the Confederation dies. If we don't try, the Confederation dies anyway, Cale replied, its voice carrying the weight of command decisions that affected billions of lives. But Marcus's plan has merit. The hegemony's greatest weakness is their certainty that force can overcome any opposition. They would not expect voluntary surrender to be a tactical choice. The debate that followed was swift and intense. Confederation military commanders appeared via hologram, reporting that their defenses were failing faster than projected. The new hegemony vessel class was proving devastatingly effective, seeming to absorb energy weapons and redirect them back at their targets. Psychological warfare technology, analyzed one of the energy beings. They're not just defeating us militarily, they're demonstrating that our own weapons are useless against them. Classic intimidation tactics. How long before they breach the chamber? Cale asked. 18 minutes, Supreme Commander. Perhaps 20 if our remaining forces can maintain their current defensive pattern. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came over him during farm emergencies, when split-second decisions meant the difference between saving a harvest and losing everything. Then here's what we do. When they break in, we surrender immediately. No heroics, no last stands. We make them believe they've won everything they wanted. And then? HFY inquired. Then we do what humans do best, Agent Morrison said, understanding dawning in her expression. We cause trouble. Kale's features shifted into its version of a grin. The hegemony has spent centuries converting other species, but they've never tried to convert humans. They have no idea what they're about to face. We'll need to coordinate with the rest of the Confederation, Theron noted. This plan only works if our people know not to attempt rescue operations. Leave that to me, Marcus said. I might just be a farmer, but I know something about patience. Sometimes the best way to protect your crop is to let the pests think they've found easy pickings, then hit them when they're not expecting it. The sounds of battle were growing closer. Through the chamber walls they could see hegemony soldiers advancing through the corridors, their black armor making them look like living shadows. These weren't the sleek, graceful forms of Confederation species, but something altogether more predatory. Positions, everyone, Kale commanded. Remember, we are not surrendering out of defeat. We are beginning the most important infiltration mission in galactic history. Marcus looked around at the diverse assembly of alien beings, each representing civilizations that had evolved over millions of years, and felt a surge of pride in his own species. Humans might be new to the galactic stage, but they were about to teach the universe something about the difference between surrender and strategic retreat. The chamber doors exploded inward, and the hegemony forces poured in like a black tide. At their head strode a figure that made even the intimidating soldiers look small by comparison, clearly their commander, its presence radiating an aura of absolute authority and merciless intelligence. Supreme Commander Kethvar, the hegemony leader, spoke in a voice like grinding metal. You will surrender the Confederation Council and submit to hegemony authority. Resistance is futile. Kale stepped forward, hands empty and visible, its posture conveying defeat. We surrender unconditionally. The hegemony commander's surprise was visible even through its armored helmet. It had clearly expected a fight, perhaps even wanted one. Easy victory was not part of their psychological warfare playbook. Too easy, the commander muttered, suspicion creeping into its voice. Marcus stepped forward, drawing attention to himself. Sometimes the smart thing to do is know when you're beaten. No point in getting everyone killed for pride. The hegemony commander studied the human for a long moment, then dismissed him as irrelevant. That dismissal, Marcus knew, was going to be their first mistake, but it wouldn't be their last. The hegemony prison ship was a monument to intimidation. Marcus had never seen architecture designed specifically to crush hope, but as he was marched through corridors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, he understood that every aspect of the vessel was calculated to break the spirit of its prisoners. The cells were arranged in a massive spiral that descended into the heart of the ship like a mechanical digestive system. Each level housed different species, their environments carefully maintained to keep them alive but uncomfortable. The message was clear. The hegemony could provide for their needs, but comfort and dignity were privileges to be earned through submission. Marcus found himself in a cell with Agent Morrison and 3 of the Confederation counselors, including Theron the Enduring. The space was large enough to accommodate the stone being's massive form, but barely. Everything about their imprisonment was designed to emphasize their helplessness. Status report, Kale's voice whispered through the walls themselves. The alien leader had somehow managed to establish a communication network using what appeared to be the ship's own systems. Sector 7, Level 12, Theron rumbled quietly. 17 counselors accounted for in this section. No sign of interrogation protocols yet. They're taking their time, Agent Morrison observed. Either they're very confident or they're planning something elaborate. Marcus was studying the cell's construction with the eye of someone who had spent decades repairing things. These walls aren't just for containment. Look at these conduits running through them. This whole ship is one big conversion machine. Over the following days, the pattern became clear. The hegemony didn't simply imprison their captives. They subjected them to a carefully orchestrated psychological campaign designed to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Holographic displays showed Confederation worlds surrendering one by one as news of the Council's capture spread. Food and water were provided, but in portions that emphasized the prisoners' dependence on their captors' mercy. Classic technique, Agent Morrison murmured during one of their whispered conferences. Learned about it in training. Isolate the target, control their information flow, demonstrate power while providing just enough comfort to make resistance seem pointless. But the hegemony had made a crucial error in their assessment of their prisoners. They understood the psychology of defeat for civilizations that had grown accustomed to peace and prosperity. They had no experience with species that had evolved through constant struggle and adaptation. "How many humans are there on Earth?" Theron asked during their third day of captivity. "About 8 billion, Marcus replied, wondering where this was going. "And how many of them know about galactic civilization?" Agent Morrison considered this. "Maybe a few thousand in government positions. The general population has no idea we're not alone." The stone being's expression, difficult to read under normal circumstances, somehow conveyed satisfaction. "Then the hegemony has gained nothing by capturing us. Even if they successfully convert the entire Confederation Council, they still face 8 billion humans who have no idea they're supposed to be defeated." Marcus felt a grin spreading across his face. "And when humans feel threatened, we don't surrender. We get stubborn." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of guards, tall, armored figures whose faces were hidden behind masks that reflected the viewers' faces back at them in distorted forms. Another psychological tactic, forcing prisoners to confront twisted versions of themselves. "The Supreme Commander will see the human representatives," one of the guards announced in that characteristic grinding voice. Marcus and Agent Morrison were escorted through corridors that grew more oppressive with each step. The walls here pulsed with an organic rhythm, as if the ship itself were a living entity, feeding on the despair of its prisoners. They were brought before a figure that Marcus immediately recognized as the hegemony commander who had captured them. But now, without the urgency of battle, he could see details that had escaped him before. The being was humanoid but wrong in fundamental ways. Too tall, too angular, with joints that bent in directions that hurt to look at. Its armor seemed to be fused with its flesh, and its eyes glowed with an intelligence that was utterly alien and completely malevolent. "I am High Dominator Vexthul," it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed designed to trigger fear responses. "I have ruled 17 star systems and converted 43 species to hegemony service. Your pathetic confederation will be the 44th. "Congratulations," Marcus said with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. "That's quite an accomplishment." Vexthul's glowing eyes narrowed. The casual response had clearly not been what it expected. "You do not seem properly impressed by our power, human." "Well," Marcus said thoughtfully, "I'm just a farmer. Power struggles aren't really my area. I'm more interested in whether your people have figured out crop rotation. Sustainable agriculture is the foundation of any lasting civilization." Agent Morrison shot him a look that suggested he might be pushing his luck. But Marcus had spent enough time around bullies to recognize the type. Vexthul was used to inspiring fear, and Marcus's complete lack of intimidation was clearly unsettling. "Your species will be integrated into the hegemony," Vexthul continued, trying to regain psychological ground. "Your planet's resources will serve our expansion. Your people will find purpose in serving a greater power. Have you told them that yet?" Agent Morrison asked innocently. "Told who what?" "My people. Have you announced to 8 billion humans that they're now part of your empire?" Vexthul's expression suggested this was a detail it hadn't considered important. "Planetary integration will proceed according to standard protocols once the Confederation formally surrenders." Marcus exchanged a glance with Agent Morrison. "So you're planning to just show up on Earth and tell everyone they're conquered now? Resistance will be futile once your leaders submit." "Our leaders," Agent Morrison said slowly, "represent maybe 500 million people on a good day. The other 7.5 billion have their own ideas about authority." For the first time, Vexthul looked uncertain. "You will broadcast surrender orders to your population." "Oh, we can try," Marcus said agreeably. "But I'm not sure how well that'll go over. Humans don't take orders very well, especially from strangers. We tend to vote on things, debate them, argue about them for decades. Democracy's messy that way." "Democracy," Vexthul pronounced the word like it tasted bad, "is inefficient. The strong should rule. The weak should serve." "Funny thing about that," Marcus said, settling back in his chair as if he were discussing farming techniques with a neighbor. "We tried that system a few times in our history. Usually didn't work out so well for the folks trying to do the ruling. Humans have this annoying habit of deciding they don't want to be ruled and doing something about it." Agent Morrison picked up the thread. Our history is basically one long story of people overthrowing anyone who tries to force them into submission. Kings, emperors, dictators, they all learned the same lesson eventually. Your primitive conflicts are irrelevant, Bexthol snapped, but there was less certainty in its voice. We possess technology beyond your comprehension. So did the British Empire when they tried to tax our tea, Marcus replied. Technology's useful, but it doesn't help much when you're trying to govern people who refuse to be governed. The High Dominator leaned forward, its glowing eyes blazing brighter. You will comply, or your species will be eliminated, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You could try that. But then you wouldn't have a species to convert, would you? And from what I understand, the whole point of this exercise is to add us to your empire, not wipe us out. The silence that followed was telling. Bexthol was clearly beginning to realize that humans might not fit the standard patterns of conquest that had served the hegemony so well with other species. Besides, Agent Morrison added casually, eliminating humans might be harder than you think. We're spread across an entire planet, in millions of different communities with thousands of different governments and cultures. We don't have a single point of failure you can target. Marcus smiled at the alien overlord. You know what you've got here? You've caught yourself a whole planet full of people who've been practicing resistance and rebellion for thousands of years, and now you want to tell them they work for you. For the first time since their capture, High Dominator Bexthol looked like it was beginning to understand that conquering humanity might be more complicated than it had anticipated. 6 weeks into their captivity, the first signs of hegemony frustration became apparent. Marcus woke to the sound of heated arguments echoing through the ship's corridors, voices raised in what was clearly a crisis meeting among their captors. They're having problems, Agent Morrison whispered from her position near the cell's observation port. I've been listening to their communications. Something about unprecedented resistance patterns and failed integration protocols. Kale's voice drifted through their improvised communication network. Reconnaissance reports are filtering in from Earth. The hegemony advance fleets have made contact with your governments. And? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Complete chaos, Theron rumbled with obvious satisfaction. Your leaders cannot agree on surrender terms because they cannot agree on who has the authority to surrender. Meanwhile, your population appears to be treating the invasion as some form of entertainment. Marcus chuckled. Sounds about right. What exactly is happening down there? Over the following days, through careful eavesdropping and Kale's intercepted communications, they pieced together a picture that would have been hilarious if the stakes weren't so high. The hegemony had arrived at Earth expecting to find a unified planetary government that could formally surrender and then enforce compliance among the population. Instead, they had encountered nearly 200 sovereign nations, each with its own government, military, and approach to the situation. The United Nations had held emergency sessions for 3 weeks without reaching any consensus on how to respond to the alien visitors. Some nations wanted to negotiate, others demanded immediate military action, and a few had simply ignored the entire situation as someone else's problem. Meanwhile, the general population had reacted to first contact in thoroughly human fashion. Social media was flooded with memes about the aliens' appearance. Entrepreneurs were already selling "Welcome Our New Overlords" t-shirts. Several major universities had issued formal invitations for the aliens to give guest lectures on galactic governance. The hegemony sent delegation ships to your major population centers, Kale reported with what Marcus could swear was amusement in its voice. They announced their intention to establish administrative control over human activities. Let me guess, Agent Morrison said. That didn't go well. The delegation to New York was met by protesters demanding to know if the aliens were going to fix the subway system. The Tokyo team was invited to participate in a game show. The Moscow representatives were told they could get in line with everyone else who wanted to rule Russia, but the current management wasn't interested in competitors. Marcus was laughing despite himself. And the military response? Equally chaotic, Theron reported. Some of your armed forces attempted to engage hegemony vessels. Others offered to provide escort services. At least 3 different groups tried to sell the aliens weapons. But it was the cultural response that seemed to be driving the hegemony to distraction. Earth's internet had become a battleground of competing theories about the aliens' intentions, with every possible conspiracy theory being proposed, debated, and mocked simultaneously. News networks were treating the invasion as a combination of breaking news and reality television. Late-night comedians were having a field day. They're trying to understand human psychology through social media analysis, Agent Morrison observed after intercepting another frustrated hegemony communication. I almost feel sorry for them. The breaking point came when High Dominator Vexthul summoned them for another interrogation. The alien overlord's previous confidence had been replaced by barely contained fury. Your species is insane, it declared without preamble. We have conquered 43 civilizations across 17 star systems. Never have we encountered such stubbornness, Marcus suggested helpfully. Chaos, Vexthul snapped. We cannot establish control over a species that refuses to acknowledge the concept of control. Your governments contradict each other. Your military forces operate independently. Your population treats our arrival as entertainment rather than conquest. Well, Agent Morrison said reasonably, you did show up without an invitation. That's generally considered rude by human standards. We have offered your species integration into the greatest empire in galactic history, Vexthul continued, its voice rising. We provide order, purpose, unity of action. In return, we ask only for compliance with hegemony directives. Marcus nodded sympathetically. I can see how that would be frustrating. But you're asking 8 billion humans to agree on something. We can't even agree on pizza toppings. What are pizza toppings? Exactly my point. The conversation was interrupted by an aide who whispered urgently in Vexthul's ear. The High Dominator's expression grew even darker. It appears, it said through gritted teeth, that your planet's population has now begun sending us requests. Requests for what? Agent Morrison asked. Everything, Vexthul replied with the tone of someone who had reached the limits of sanity. Military technology, medical advances, entertainment contracts, immigration policies, trade agreements, tourism packages, and something called exclusive streaming rights to the Galactic Empire reality show. Marcus tried to keep a straight face. That last one actually sounds pretty interesting. We are conquerors, not content producers. And maybe that's your problem right there, Agent Morrison suggested. You're approaching this like a hostile takeover, but humans respond better to collaboration. We're social creatures. We like to feel included in decisions that affect us. Vexthul stared at her as if she had spoken in an alien language. The strong rule. The weak submit. This is the natural order. According to who? Marcus asked. Did you take a vote on that? Votes are, what is the word? Irrelevant. Power determines truth. See, that's where you've got us all wrong, Marcus said, leaning forward in his chair. Humans figured out a long time ago that power without consent just makes people angry. And angry humans are remarkably creative when it comes to making life difficult for people they don't like. As if summoned by his words, another aide appeared with what was clearly more bad news. Vexthul listened with growing horror. What now? Agent Morrison asked. Your species, Vexthul said slowly, has begun reverse engineering our technology. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Is that a problem? They are improving it. Well, yeah, that's what humans do. We tinker with things, make them better. It's kind of our thing. They have also begun broadcasting entertainment programs featuring scenarios where humans defeat alien invaders through cleverness rather than superior firepower. Agent Morrison grinned. You've been memed, haven't you? The internet turned you into a joke. The final blow came when Kale's voice suddenly filled the chamber, not whispered through hidden communications but broadcast openly through the ship's systems. High Dominator Vexthul, the Supreme Commander said with unmistakable authority. You are hereby ordered to stand down your forces and prepare for immediate withdrawal from the Sol system. Vexthul spun toward the communication console. Impossible. You are our prisoner. No, Kale replied calmly. I am the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Confederation, and for the past 6 weeks, I have been observing the most remarkable display of resistance psychology in recorded history. Your prisoners have just taught the galaxy something invaluable about the difference between conquest and leadership. The lights throughout the ship suddenly shifted from the oppressive red of hegemony control to the warm gold of Confederation systems. Through the viewports, Marcus could see Confederation vessels emerging from jump points around them, their elegant forms a stark contrast to the brutal architecture of the hegemony fleet. You see, Cale continued as Confederation security forces began materializing throughout the ship. Humans have shown us that true strength doesn't come from forcing others to submit. It comes from inspiring them to choose cooperation freely. The hegemony's greatest weapon has always been the belief that resistance is futile, but humans don't believe in futility. They believe in possibility. Vexthal was staring at the tactical displays showing its fleet being systematically surrounded and disabled by Confederation forces that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. While you were attempting to break the Council's will, Cale explained, we were learning from our human friends how to turn your own tactics against you. Every day you held us prisoner. Confederation infiltration teams were studying your technology, your psychology, your methods. And every report from Earth showed us new ways that humans refused to accept defeat. Marcus stood up, feeling oddly sorry for the alien despot. You made the same mistake bullies always make. You assumed that because you could win a fight, people would respect your authority. But respect has to be earned, not taken. Agent Morrison joined him. Humans have spent thousands of years dealing with people who thought might made right. We've gotten pretty good at proving them wrong. As Confederation forces led the hegemony leadership away in restraints, Cale approached the humans with an expression of profound gratitude. Marcus Chen, it said formally, by offering shelter to a stranger, you have given humanity a place among the stars. But more than that, you have given the galaxy a new understanding of what strength really means.